Well, the big story tonight is the House Republicans preparing to oust Congresswoman Liz Cheney from her leadership position this week. The move shows just how much of a grip former President Trump continues to have on the Republican Party. To discuss, let's bring in Florida Congresswoman Cammack. Congresswoman, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be back.
All right, where do you come down on this effort to oust Liz Cheney from her leadership position, and are you backing Congresswoman Elise Stefanik to replace her?
Well, as the youngest Republican woman in Congress today, I noticed the title underneath, the future of the GOP. This is obviously very important to me as the future of the GOP. And I can tell you one thing, right now, more than ever, in the minority, Republicans have to be one team, one mission. And all the infighting is just a sideshow and a distraction from the real issues that we have at hand. And quite frankly, the infighting just gives ammunition for the left to come attack us, but then also raise money against us. So I've been very, very cautious and cognizant that all this infighting does nothing to further the conservative cause or take our country back. But I can tell you right now, if we are not all on the same sheet of music, it's not going to work. So I think it's pretty much a done deal that Representative Cheney will no longer be our conference chair Wednesday morning. And it's going to be a contentious fight, unfortunately, but we need to move past this. Again, we need to be one team, one mission, and that mission is to take the House back.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's interesting, by the way, you touched on this. You are the youngest Republican woman right now serving, correct?
Yes. Yes, I am.
And I remember when Elise Stefanik, I mean, it's kind of, there is sort of an interesting dynamic there. So probably in a couple of years, we're going to be seeing you head into leadership as well. We'll remember those days when we had you on. It's interesting. You talk about the sort of infighting, and I agree with that. I think that's the right way to phrase this. The media, though, if you listen to the left-wing media, not that I recommend that, you hear the word civil war come up a lot. I have a problem with that. What do you say?
I agree with you, Sean. I don't think that there's a civil war. I think that there's a small faction of the Republican Party that doesn't believe in the America First agenda, and they want to cast aside the last 4 years as though they didn't happen. But the fact remains that the Republican Party is largely behind the America First agenda, and President Trump was the leader of that movement. It's time to recognize that, and if we're not all on one sheet of music, then that's okay. But as far as a leadership position, and when you are the face and voice of the conference, and 90% of the conference is marching to that tune, you need to reflect that. And I know it's difficult. Republicans, we are largely individualistic in that regard. But again, we have to be one team, one mission, and that mission is to take the House back. And Americans are counting on us to do that. There's no civil war. That's a fallacy. This is a family fight that has been going on behind closed doors. So Wednesday will hopefully be the end of it, and we can move forward.
I agree with you. I know the way the media is making this sound like some big civil war. At the end of the day, I've made this point before, Congresswoman Cheney is in leadership. The conference chair oversees the messaging, right? And if you're not going to carry the message of the majority of the conference, then it's just not a good fit. That doesn't mean you can't be in Congress. I may disagree with some of her positions or what she has said, but at the end of the day, she can worry about representing Wyoming. But if you're going to represent people like you and the rest of the conference, you have to have the majority of conference behind you, and clearly she's lost that.
Exactly. And, at the end of the day, I think the Republican Party is big enough as far as a tent, if you will, to house a variety of different opinions. But that doesn't mean that we compromise our conservative values and principles to conform, right? But again, if you're in leadership, if you make that choice to be in leadership, you have to represent the majority of the conference wishes and wills and viewpoints. And right now, Representative Cheney, even though I do respect her, she is not doing that. So it's time for us, again, we've got to get very, very focused, laser focused on the next 18 months. We've got to take this House back. Too much is riding on it. The soul of our country is at stake. And I'll be damned if we let this infighting take us down while the Democrats raise money and gain more power and seats off of it.
Congresswoman, I want to switch gears to the border before we let you go. You recently contributed to an op-ed with New York Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis and Missouri Congresswoman Ann Wagner, encouraging the president and the vice president to go down the border. They have yet to go. It said anyone with a heart and a mind can see the only winners in this dangerous game are drug cartels, traffickers, and abusers. For the sake of the women and the immigrants you so often claim to represent, it's time to put a stop to this crisis. So, Congresswoman, what kind of leadership is needed at the border right now?
Well, honestly, this administration could start with acknowledging that it is, in fact, a crisis. If you can't even call it what it is, you have no capability to fix or handle it. And what we've seen, and I have seen with my own two eyes at the border, I've been there twice. I've seen a 9-year-old that was gang raped until her vocal cords gave out from screaming. I've seen Customs and Border Patrol agents throw their hands up as they just watch people come and walk across the border. I've seen our legal ports of entry being riddled with drugs, narcotics, weapons, God knows what else. And meanwhile, they have an administration that is telling them to stand down and stand back. And that is inappropriate. If you don't have a secure border, you don't have a secure nation. And with it being a humanitarian crisis, with it being a national security crisis, a public health crisis, that is something that every American should care about, because at the end of the day, we are all border states at this point. These drugs and these folks are coming to our communities unvetted, with no COVID tests. And I'm telling you, as the wife of a first responder who hears the stories from her husband day in and day out, the drugs that we're seeing increasing, just surging across the border, they're landing in our hometowns. My husband visited the same guy 3 times who had overdosed on a mixture of heroin and fentanyl. This is all stemming from the lack of border security that we have. And this administration needs to get very serious about, one, calling it what it is, reinstating the Trump policies of the Migrant Protection Protocol, and also extending Title 42, which is the only thing that is kind of holding the tide back, if you will, from what we're currently seeing. It's terrible to say, but if your ego is so big that you can't acknowledge the good that was done in the previous administration because of your hatred for the man, then you have a problem. And that's why I call President Biden trafficker in chief. He is facilitating the trafficking of children and young women across this border. And he is encouraging our administrations, through either it be HHS or DHS, to complete the smuggling ring on behalf of the cartels. And the cartels are making a heck of a lot of money. It's a heck of a day in America if you're a cartel member, and we are complicit in it as the government.
Very true. Congresswoman, we're headed down to your neck of the woods for this town hall with Governor DeSantis. So we'll let you, we'll check in with you when we get there. Thank you for being with us.
I appreciate it, Sean. You have a good one. Thank you so much.